Good evening and welcome to The Breakdown, brought to you by the Lincoln Project. I am Tara Setmayer, and my buddy Rick Wilson is off tonight. He's in much need of some R&R, so we will see Rick Wilson back next week. So today was the first full day of the new Biden administration, and there is lots to be done. And Joe Biden is wasting no time in getting right to work. So tonight's show, we have two great guests. We're going to talk a little bit about what's next for Biden. Is he up to the task? What kind of challenges will he face? So we have two great guests for you tonight. Our first guest is a legendary journalist and a civil rights pioneer herself. You hear an amazing story about her experience integrating the University of Georgia back in the 60s. And that is author Charlayne Hunter-Gault. She'll be with us to talk about journalism in the Biden era and learning from history and the significance of Vice President Kamala Harris as the first woman of color vice president. And then our second guest tonight is CNN presidential historian and professor Douglad Brinkley. We're going to talk a little bit about the historical context of what Biden faces as where does it fit in history as far as the challenges that are ahead for him and the mess that was left behind him. Trump is gone. Can we just soak that in for a second? It is President Joe Biden. I woke up this morning and was like, is he still president? I can't believe it. I'm thrilled. I cannot. It just feels like a weight has been lifted off our national shoulders, and it's just a new day. Everyone has a pep in their step. The birds are chirping louder. Dr. Fauci was smiling ear to ear. It's just a whole new breath of fresh air, and democracy is no longer on life support. It is fully oxygenated and ready to go. And so are we tonight. As always, we want to hear from you, so send us your tweets if you have questions. Hashtag AskTheBreakdown. And we will be taking live callers tonight. So you know the routine, the new school way of doing things nowadays. Give us a shout in the Zoom room and we will take your calls later in the show. So as I was mentioning, President Joe Biden was talking about some really important themes yesterday during his inaugural speech. And one of the daunting challenges that we face is not only what's happening with coronavirus, but it is interconnected with the economy. And the new unemployment numbers are not good. I believe it was 900,000 people filed for new unemployment claims. And that's, I think there was 16 million. 16 million have claimed benefits as of January 2nd. So we are still in an economic 911. And this is something that the new Biden administration is going to tackle. There's already discussions of what's going to be in the stimulus package. He's proposed a $1.9 trillion stimulus package. Getting everyone to be on the same side with that, how that money is spent is a Herculean task, even with control of both houses. So we need to pay attention to that. There will be a lot of political brinkmanship when it comes to money like that. There's a lot of horse trading. But it has to get done. Something has to happen. We can't continue on this path. Speaking of the pandemic, today there was a press conference with Dr. Fauci, as I said, who had an extra pep in his step today. And there was just something so refreshingly normal about that press briefing. First of all, the fact that we even had one. Secondly, the fact that, I don't know if you saw the video, if you watched it, or if you haven't, go back and watch it. It was just normal the way President Biden greeted Dr. Fauci. He was like, hey, Dr. Fauci. And, Vice President Harris was like, Doctor, how are you? And Dr. Fauci was like, doing well, Mr. President. You could just see that it was just a whole new attitude, because this is an administration that actually listens to science. They actually listen to the facts But the scary part that was revealed about this whole thing now that we're finding out is that the Trump administration actually literally had no plan for vaccine distribution. That is an unbelievable dereliction of duty. How the hell did they not? Nothing. So literally, this administration is starting pretty much from scratch. So what the hell was the Corona Task Force doing this whole time? What was Mike Pence doing besides kissing Trump's ass? I guess he couldn't kiss Trump's ass and work at the same time. People are dying by the thousands every day. We have new variants coming into this country from South Africa, from Europe, and we don't have a plan for a vaccine distribution. It is just hard to imagine, frankly, that there was that much incompetence. I mean, you had one job, people, one job. Let's distribute a vaccine. I just don't understand. But something that I took to heart that Dr. Fauci said today at the press briefing, not to mention, like I said, the fact that we even had one is refreshing. But here's some things that he said. He said some good things today. Let's take a look.
One of the things that was very clear as recently as about 15 minutes ago when I was with the president is that one of the things that we're going to do is to be completely transparent, open, and honest. If things go wrong, not point fingers, but to correct them and to make everything we do be based on science and evidence. I mean, that was literally a conversation I had 15 minutes ago with the president.
Science, transparency, facts. These are things that we've been deprived of for so long. That's the simplest things that are obvious make us happy. I am thrilled to see Dr. Fauci back in the fold, telling us straight, because, Biden was honest today, too, during the press conference. It's going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. But he has done some other things. He signed executive orders. One of them included a mask mandate for all federal properties and for interstate travel. That's on planes and buses and trains, things that should have been done before. Also, they're looking at testing, mandatory testing for coming back into the country if you're coming from out of the country, even if you are an American citizen or a resident here. So we've got to toughen up. We've got to. Our own behavior dictates our future here with combating this virus if we have any hope of returning to normal sooner than later. So all good things. Something else that was announced today, FBI Director Christopher Wray. Remember that guy? He was AWOL pretty much through the transition period, trying to keep his head down and keep his job. Many of you may or may not know, but the FBI director has a 10-year term, and that is to avoid politicizing the FBI. That was the intent, so that it would carry over to other administrations. But the FBI director can be fired at will, as we all know. Ask James Comey. However, Joe Biden decided to keep Christopher Wray on for now as FBI director for continuity. So he kept himself above the fray or below the swamp, and it seemed to work out for him. So Christopher Wray is keeping his job. Meanwhile, the Trump cultists are very confused, and they have been freaking out. There's been videos all over the internet. It's quite entertaining, but they have just completely freaked out that the reality that their cult leader has lost and that Q and the plan they're not coming to fruition. What do they do now? Let's check it out meanwhile.
So help you God?
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Meanwhile, from the churning swamps of MAGA world.
After President Joe Biden was sworn into office yesterday, some QAnon followers were left searching for answers after predictions of a second Trump term and a so-called storm failed to materialize.
I thought something would happen today in Trump's speech. Nothing.
This is crazy. Nothing's happening.
You cannot tell me there are 35,000 troops in D.C. for a man who got 64,000 votes. Or 64 million.
These people will always sort of be under this illusion.
Biden is never going to be the president. Just because he just swore in does not. There are documents that have to be signed.
And what he's signing here is the Inauguration Day proclamation.
Please, President Trump, I hope you
you have a plan.
These people really looked at the former president as a savior. He really took advantage of these feelings. These feelings aren't going away.
White supremacist groups and these channels are recruiting QAnon people now.
These people are not going to suddenly stop being angry or violent. And now is not the time to suddenly let our guard down, even though it was great to see normalcy in Washington, D.C. today.
Poor things. Bless their hearts. You know, the sad part about this is there is an entire media ecosystem that is feeding this nonsense. And when you have Fox News now not taking a look within themselves to say, maybe we played a role in this and we should recalibrate now that we're in a different period and Trump is out of office. No. They're tripling down. Why? Because they're losing viewers to the crazies over at OANN and Newsmax. And then, of course, you have right-wing talk radio, which is just completely off the rails. I mean, Rush Limbaugh was out there telling people that the reason why they had flags wasn't because during the inauguration to replace people wasn't because of COVID. It was just a cover for the fact that Joe Biden couldn't get anyone to come to the inauguration, and that it was an excuse to militarize DC. I mean, the lies are they're getting worse. So there is no course correction for these people, despite the fact, especially the QAnon kooks, they're still searching for Q, and they're still harassing Comet Pizza here in DC, where a crazy of theirs a couple years ago went there and shot the place up thinking there was a child trafficking sex ring going on there. I mean, it is just completely out of control. They're not going away. And Joe Biden, in his speech yesterday, mentioned the importance of combating disinformation and the damage that it's doing to our country and our democracy. He said this, he said, "We must reject a culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured." Amen. That is going to be a Herculean task. You're going to hear me say that a lot because there are a lot of those, but he's right. And how we do that, how do we move forward when you have millions of people that reject objective truth, when they argue with you that the sun rises in the west instead of the east? It's very difficult, but that's why we here at the Lincoln Project are dedicated to making sure that we inform you, that we bring you the truth, and that we combat that misinformation so that we can have some hope of trying to right the ship. So that's why we're here for you. We're going to bring you the truth. Let's take a tweet. Ask the Breakdown. Why is Majority Leader Schumer negotiating with Minority Leader McConnell in the first place? Why did McConnell come out with a February 14th trial date if Schumer controls the calendar? What is happening? So, I also love the sound of Minority Leader McConnell. Yay. So the issue here is this. Joe Biden still needs to have, he still needs to get his confirmation for, so he's got multiple cabinet officials who need to be confirmed through the Senate, right? And like we saw the other day, Josh Hawley was able to prevent the forward movement of one of those nominees. They put a delay on it. One senator can do that if they want through the filibuster. And if they do that, then they need to have 60 votes instead of a simple majority. So there needs to be some negotiation to have some cooperation for the Biden administration to get their nominees through the Senate, and some cooperation from Republican senators. So there isn't really much that Mitch McConnell can actually do. That's why being in the minority is awful. Chuck Schumer ultimately controls the Senate calendar, just like Nancy Pelosi ultimately controls what comes to the floor in the House. But this is what happens. There's a little bit of political gamemanship going on here, and that's why you see it. McConnell can suggest it, but it's ultimately up to Chuck Schumer. So we want to see some compromise. We do, if we want to get anything done. And the Biden administration needs Republicans not to throw wrenches in the system and delay the process. They need to get their government and their cabinet filled in. So that's what you're seeing. All right. We'll take one more tweet before we bring in our first guest. All right. Marty Joe Grayson, do you think Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Ted Cruz, and Josh Hawley will be expelled from Congress. Well, I think that they deserve to be expelled from Congress under the 14th Amendment, Section 3. Whether they will or won't be, it's a tough call. We haven't seen that in a long time, and it takes a lot for colleagues to expel someone. However, there are multiple senators who have filed ethics complaints formally against Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz in the Senate, so that opens up a formal investigation through the Ethics Committee. And Senator Hirono of Hawaii was on CNN tonight discussing how she would be okay with them being expelled. And that's ultimately what she thinks their punishment should be, but at least start with a full ethics committee investigation and let them figure out what that penalty should be from there. So I don't know what's happening in the House yet. There's a lot going on, but Boebert and Taylor Greene, they are going to be a nuisance. The fact that they even got elected in the first place is a whole different story. It's a problem in and of itself, but they will be nuisances. The right-wing media is lionizing them, and that goes to show you where their priorities are. So, but we'll keep a watch on it. Abe is watching. Best believe the coup caucus is not going to be unaccountable for their misdeeds, at least not from us. All right, let's bring in tonight's first guest. Charlayne Hunter-Gault is an award-winning journalist with more than 50 years in the industry. She's the author of 4 books, including To the Mountaintop, My Journey Through the Civil Rights Movement, and In My Place, built around her experiences as the first Black woman to attend the University of Georgia in 1961. That was 4 years ago. 60 years ago. This month. Charlayne. Okay. Got it. I just heard that she's having a little difficulty with her audio, which is fine. That happens in internet land. So we'll take more of your tweets. Okay. Ask the Breakdown from Sailboats. Trump demanded security, Secret Service for his adult children for another 6 months, which will cost the taxpayers millions. Why is he or his adult kids entitled to this? And does Biden approve of this? Or does Biden approve this? Or are all presidents granted a wish list on their way out? So it is customary. There is a former president's act. It's a federal statute that determines what a ex-president is entitled to once they leave office. And there have been amendments to this. And Bill Clinton started the lifetime Secret Service detail. He wrote that in and said, yep, you get it for life, unless you choose otherwise. George W. Bush, he said, after 10 years, I will relieve the Secret Service of protecting me and then hand that over to the Texas Rangers in Texas. So that's what George W. Bush did. Barack Obama has Secret Service for life, and Donald Trump is entitled to Secret Service for life. Now, his adult children are not entitled to it. He would have to request it, and that's what he did. And unfortunately, that is one of the perks that a president has. They can ask for that. They will have it granted to them. It's my understanding it's only 6 months, but this is unprecedented. We're looking at something like 13 of his extended family members. So that's his kids, the grandkids, their wives, their spouses. It's absurd. It is an absolute absurd waste of taxpayer money. These people are supposed to be billionaires. They can pay for their own protection. What are we doing this for? So I think it's just to portray that they're still important, and it gives them, a sense of importance and relevance to their followers. Since we know that Ivanka is flirting with running for Senate against Marco Rubio in Florida, and Don Jr. is thinking about running for office, so this still gives them that air of being, in authority. Now, Barron Trump, the minor child of Donald Trump, he's only entitled until he's 16, and then Trump would have to request any extensions, and the Biden administration would have to approve that. So I hope that after the 6 months that the Biden administration yanks that protection from the Trump children. Frankly, Donald Trump shouldn't get it either. Unfortunately, he's entitled to it by statute, but I don't think he's ever going to change that unless Melania says, I don't want it anymore, and they pay for their own, but unless he goes broke. Let's take another tweet. All right. Panic Girl Smiles. Are there elements in the GOP leadership who believe the insurrection was either justified or less serious than is being reported? Is there a move to excuse away the coup attempt and wash away the impeachment trial? Oh, absolutely, Heather. Obviously, you don't watch Fox News or Newsmax or OANN. Um, they have really tried to whitewash what happened on January 6th. And even though Mitch McConnell has come forward and said that Donald Trump provoked what happened, that was a purposeful choice of words, by the way, instead of incitement, because that incitement has legal implications, but that he provoked what happened on January 6th. You had some other members, even McCarthy was reported during a call to his conference about 10 days ago saying, yeah, Trump, had a part in riling them up. But that's not what he said publicly. And he was asked again today, and he backed off again. So they're being very duplicitous. They're playing both sides of the fence here on this because there are so many people in the Republican Party that still support Donald Trump, even after everything that happened, even with him out of office. It's clear that Donald Trump is still the titular head of the Republican Party, and they're afraid of what his constituents will do. So, yes, there are a lot of people, except for Liz Cheney. She was the only person in Republican leadership who stood up for impeachment and was unequivocal about her feelings about Donald Trump's role in the insurrection. And she was right. And it could cost her politically. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. But she was the only person in Republican leadership that was unequivocal about Donald Trump's role about that insurrection until Mitch McConnell decided to say something. So we'll see. I'll believe it when they actually cast a vote to convict him and stop him from ever running again for office. I think that battle is going on right now in the Republican Party, what to do about this. But they installed all of their cronies, all of the pro-Trump cronies, back into the party establishment, the party hierarchy, from RNC chair down to the NRSC chairman. They're all pro-Trump cronies. So there has been no move within the party infrastructure to divorce themselves from Trumpism. And I think that that's, to their detriment and possible demise. All right. One more tweet, or are we ready to go? All right. We're fired up and ready to go. Let's bring Charlayne back in. There she is. Charlayne, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry you had internet gremlins tonight.
Well, yeah. But I heard most of your, shall we say, soliloquy? Passionate soliloquy. Yes, passionate.
Yeah, I can't help it. I always joke that I'm from Jersey, and it's in our DNA as Jersey girls. We talk with our hands. That's the Italian blood in me, and the passion is both the Italian blood and being from Jersey. So it is what it is. I can't help it. Thank you. So for those who don't know you, I hope that they look up your work and your life's work and your history, because you've led an amazing life of accomplishment and experiences. And I think it's so important for someone who's lived history to discuss the context of what we're seeing today. Earlier this month, you wrote a really powerful op-ed for the New York Times about your experience integrating University of Georgia in 1961. Tell us a little more about that.
Well, that was a long time ago, 60 years ago, but it's fresh in my mind. People talk about why we did it. And I do want to mention my great ancestor, Hamilton Holmes, Dr. Hamilton Holmes, who went into the University of Georgia with me. And we were just two high school students who were determined to realize our dreams. And Hamilton had always wanted to be a doctor. His grandfather was a doctor. And I had wanted to be a journalist since I was 5 years old. In fact, Brenda Starr was my model. I didn't know about Ida B. Wells at that time. She became my role model a little bit later.
Ida B. Wells was a tough cookie.
She was a tough
fan
cookie.
of hers.
Yeah, right. And so, she was tougher than Brenda Starr.
Yes.
And she advocated for us, for our people, and in a very positive way. And so, But at that time, I just wanted to be a journalist, and Hamp wanted to be a doctor. And that was where we saw our ability to prepare for our various two professions. And so it was a determination that got us through. It was, I mean, sometimes when I see some of the demonstrations going on today, I tear up a little bit because it's so reminiscent. And I think that that's why history is important, that we have seen from the time that Black people came on these shores in the 1500s, that they have had to face challenges not unlike what Hamilton and I faced, and not unlike what happened on the Capitol, although it wasn't in the nation's capital, but there has always been resistance. And so I look at what's going on today, and I think about Hamilton and me and what we went through, and I'm encouraged because we succeeded. We succeeded because we were determined to realize our dreams and to insist that this country, and at that time, Georgia, live up to the creed that all people are created equal. And so while it's painful sometimes to see people still having to make that protest to say, wait a minute, I'm who I am and I should be like anybody else. But we succeeded, and so many others succeeded over time. John Lewis succeeded, all these other people succeeded. So while it can be very frustrating to see what's going on, I remain hopeful because I've been there.
Well, that's encouraging to hear, because there were a lot of reasons not to be hopeful during the last 4 years. It was a very taxing time for a lot of us, and I can imagine for people like yourself who lived through those tumultuous times in the 60s and saw the struggle and fought on the front lines of it, to see it come full circle like what we've seen in Georgia. With the election of Ossoff and Warnock, both firsts for the state of Georgia. And my good friend Nikema Williams, she replaced John Lewis in that seat. I'm so proud of her. We got to get you on the show. What did that feel like for you? You know, you said you feel hopeful, but take us through how you felt when you found out that both Ossoff and Warnock ended up winning those Georgia runoffs and making history.
Well, I couldn't watch that night because it was so close. And I woke up early in the morning and my husband was preparing to go play golf. And he said, they did it. And I said, did what? Because I was afraid what he was going to say. And it was very exciting. I mean, it's like, I don't know if you saw the Charles Blow piece in the same op-ed that ran when mine did, but he talked about moving from New York back to Atlanta because he saw so much promise in the reverse migration, you know, because one of the things that we learned is that while there was a northern migration where people of color thought that they were going to have a better life, they might have for a minute or two, but over time, the same sort of systemic racism prevented them from realizing their dreams. So that what Charles Blow was saying is that, you know, now that you have a critical mass of people in Georgia who have a different way of viewing their opportunities, it was a very inviting place for him and for so many others. And his point was that while, and I agree with this, while the opportunity now is greater in terms of a Black reverse migration, you look at Ossoff, the first Jewish person elected from there. So it's like the civil rights movement. It wasn't just Black people. It was about Black people and their goals, but so many others joined it. And that is one of the reasons why I sort of get a little bit annoyed when we generalize too much about white people, and even when we generalize about Black people, because, you know, we're not all the same. But we did have a very good movement that involved people of all colors. And I think that that's what just happened in Georgia, although you have a good majority now of Black people who was saying it's our time. Again.
That's right. That's right. And I thought it was also apropos that it was the first Jewish and first Black senators for Georgia, given the role that a lot of the Jewish brothers and sisters during the civil rights movement were arm in arm with Black folks fighting for civil rights at the time. And 2 years ago, I was in Israel with a rabbi who had the opportunity to, his father had an opportunity to march with Dr. King during the civil rights movement. And it was just he had, photographs and of that, of his dad. And it was just really a powerful moment for us to be there, knowing the role, being in Israel, and then just feeling the impact of Dr. King and the civil rights movement there as well. And we were there during Hanukkah. So it was
Right.
incredibly moving. As a
Right.
matter of fact, that's where I got this shawl in Jerusalem, for
Well,
people who are
beautiful.
wondering. Thank you. And
If you get
reminding me of that.
you can send it to me.
Or I can, next time I go to Jerusalem, I would be happy to bring one back for you.
Well, that's interesting,
yeah.
your point that you're making, because this current documentary that's on MLK/FBI,
Yes.
they point out that Stanley Levinson who is Jewish, was also one of the big supporters of Dr. King and so many others. That's why history is so important, and I just can't stress that enough.
Indeed. That's why we have a historian coming on after this to
I'm
put a lot of this in
excited about it.
context. Yes, there is a method to our madness here. We
can
have
see
living
that.
history with you, and that we've got the book smarts coming after that. But I think living history is even more important. You often talk about the role of journalism. You talk about the importance of history, but there is journalism plays an incredible role. You brought up Ida B. Wells. When I was in Birmingham last year for I guess it was 2019, my friend Steve Reed became the first Black mayor of Birmingham, which was an incredible celebration. And I had the opportunity to go to the lynching memorial, which was one of the most emotionally difficult things to endure, to see that horror in front of you, of what Black folks endured in this country under slavery, under Jim Crow. But they also have a memorial there. And I encourage anyone, if you ever go to Birmingham, Alabama, you need to go to the lynching memorial. I think that's something that every student in the South, particularly in places where lynching was so pervasive, to see that memorial and learn about the terrorism that was inflicted on people of color. But there is also a memorial there to Ida B. Wells. And I was thrilled to come across it because I am such a fan of hers, because, like I said, she was tough. And journalism was her way of using her power back in those days, in 1880s and 90s and the early 1900s. That it was difficult to do. And she dedicated her life to uncovering and the horrors of lynching, and also to women's suffrage. And she said, in order to right the wrongs, you have to shine the light of truth upon them. And I live my life by that mantra every single day. It's why we do what we do. And I think that is in line with why you do what you do. So talk a little bit about what role, the importance of the role of journalism in educating and informing the public. Why do you think it's so important?
Well, I think that what you just put your finger on it. I mean, we have to be able to speak truth to power. We're the conveyors of information. Now, we sometimes make mistakes, but the best of us, the best publications correct their mistakes, and because we're all human. But, I think it was Edward R. Murrow who said that he was talking about television, but I think it's true of journalism then, in his day, and it's true today, that journalism is something that can teach. He was talking about TV, so he said this instrument can teach, it can illuminate, it can inspire, but it can only do so to the extent that human beings are prepared to use it to those ends. Otherwise, it becomes merely lights and wires in a box. And so it means that we have a special role to play on behalf of citizens who can't be everywhere we are. And so it's important for us to not be intimidated by the criticisms that, as you would know, come from some quarters these days, but we've always had criticism. And I just did a memory of Jim Lehrer, my colleague, who's
Yes.
now an ancestor at the, and he was so tenacious about, I mean, Jim wouldn't even vote because he thought that that would compromise his ability to transfer good information to people, good news that people could use. And I myself have just started a fund at the, well, a couple of years ago, a fund at the University of Georgia called Giving Voice to the Voiceless, which provides a little bit of money to young people there who are learning this profession and who think it's very important to go out and find people who otherwise would not be able to articulate their own situations and speak through them. So I'm very excited about that, because it's not only young people who are looking at African Americans, but they're looking at all people of color, which I think is a real challenge for us these days.
That's fantastic. And I think that to encourage more people, and especially people of color, to get into the profession of journalism, to be able to tell stories through their own experiences, not only through their own experiences, but also just the pure art of journalism, that of being objective and reporting the news. And it is a public service. And a lot of people forget that, the importance of it. I mean, Thomas Jefferson was a huge, huge advocate of the newspapers and making sure that people were informed, and that's why freedom of the press was so important in our founding documents, because he said that an uninformed citizenry is like, sheep to the wolves of tyranny if we have an uninformed citizenry. And you look at what's happening today, and with the propaganda and the lies coming out of the irresponsible side of journalism. I mean, this is far from muckraking journalism. This is just flat out propaganda. What do you think journalists could learn to help kind of repair some of the distrust that the public now has for them? Because the media is probably close, maybe only Congress is less popular than the media now. I think that's a shame.
Well, I didn't get a chance because I was preparing for this program tonight. So I didn't get a chance to look at all of the press conference that the current president's new press spokesman had, but she was smiling and not being pissed off at anybody but everybody was being very polite. But I think, again, I'm tired of hearing the term FAKE news, and I wish journalists would stop using it, because that just feeds into the notion that we're illegitimate. And so I want to just take that word out of everything that's being used by anybody anywhere. I know that's not possible, but I think the critical thing for us journalists to remember is that we have to produce news that can be used by people to make good decisions about their own lives, not to make us look good. I mean, it's nice to get a Pulitzer or a Peabody or, an award every now and then, but it's not about that. It's really about serving people with good information so that they are the center of attention and not us.
That's right. They always, my first journalism professor at George Washington University, Professor Puffenbarger, who is no longer with us, he always said, never become the story, right? That was always something that you were taught in print journalism, in broadcast journalism. The worst thing you could ever do was you become the story. And I think a lot of people have violated that axiom of journalism nowadays, because a lot of it's become performance art. And that just does a disservice to everyone. So I think there's a lot of soul searching that needs to happen within the media profession as well. Now that there's a new era ushered in, and the tabloid aspect of the Trump administration is behind us, I hope, because we have some real problems that need to be uncovered in this country and need to be covered and brought to the people. And we need our journalists back.
But I also think, and I said when we were talking about preparing for this program, that I want to be very careful because I want to maintain my, not objectivity, but my distance as a journalist from, but I think that the way some of us were treated, and I say us because I identify with Yamiche Alcindor, I identify with so many of the women journalists who were covering the White House and how they were treated. And so I just think that it's very difficult for them to continue to stand back when they get so much thrown at them that is just inappropriate. And I'm just hoping that in this next iteration of leadership, there's respect on both sides, that the leaders respect, especially the women journalists, because they've had the hardest time, I think, although the men too have been disrespected. But you just have to be committed to what you're doing. And if that ever happens again, just be able to put your armor on, and your armor is your professional responsibility and commitment to telling the truth and providing news that people can use. I call that armor. So when you're attacked, let's hope it doesn't happen again, as it has happened in previous years, but wear that armor so that you don't have to fight back. You just keep working on behalf of the public that you're there to serve.
That's great advice. And I think that the battle that women journalists and women of color journalists like Yamiche, like April Ryan and others endured, Kirsten Welker, I mean, it was, I think that prepared them. It certainly sharpened their swords and their armor. And you are not going to see that same attitude from this administration. Jen Psaki is a friend of mine. She was a colleague at CNN. She's incredibly competent and will be a breath of fresh air from the podium of professionalism. She's done it before. She was a spokeswoman at the State Department. She was the comms director in the Obama White House in the second term. She is top notch. And Joe Biden himself respects women. The most important people in his life are his wife and his sister, who's been by his side through his entire political career. So he has incredible respect for women and has no problem elevating women to positions of power. And it is a marked contrast from that misogynist pig that we had as a president for the last 4 years. We won't have to worry about Joe Biden grabbing any women by anywhere they're not supposed to be. And that will be reflected in the way that he...
You said it, I didn't. But let me say that there's going to come a time when there are going to be tough questions to this administration.
Indeed, and there should be.
Yeah. And so what we have to hope for is with our people that they remain true to the work that they're supposed to do, which is to hold those in power accountable. And let's, again, because they're not going to be perfect,
That's right.
It's going to be a perfect smooth sailing because the problems in this country and the world are so intense. But
that's right.
That's what we want, respect on both sides. And I think that if we keep singing that song, R-E-S-P-E-C-T, play it, I think we'll have a better environment for those of us who are journalists and for those who make the news.
Indeed. Before I let you go, and thank you for spending some time with us on a Thursday night, you wrote a compelling article in The New Yorker that caught my attention because friends of mine who have been in conservative circles for a long time have been warning the Democrats that they were losing the support of Black men during this election cycle. And you wrote an article chronicling some Black male voters in Florida, I believe it was Sarasota, and their attitude toward Donald Trump and voting. And you said, and I believe the name of the article, I have it here, a Florida demographic that could swing the election. Trump ended up winning Florida by a considerable amount, and it was probably the Latino vote that swung it for him there. But he did win. He increased his percentage of Black votes in Florida and other places, which was a phenomenon that I think has yet to be fully explored. But you tapped into that a little bit, and just briefly tell our viewers about what you saw on the ground with Black voters in Florida, and whether that's a warning sign for the Democrats and the Biden administration.
Well, I was curious, so I went to one of the Black communities in Sarasota because my husband, I don't get involved in politics in this way, but he had done some polling during the campaign of Hillary Clinton. Now, this was after 8 years of President Obama, first Black president, and he knocked on doors where Black men said they were going to not vote. Why should they vote? Nothing had happened for them in the past 8 years. Now, they were talking about the Obama administration. So I was very curious. So I went to one of those areas that he had worked in, and I found this bunch of brothers who were sitting on a bench in a park. I can't tell you what else was going on there because that wouldn't be what the story is about, but there's some interesting things going on. But I went over and I talked to them. One had on purple shoes, and that was how I introduced myself. My favorite color is purple, and I got involved with the discussion of purple. Turns out every one of these men had been in prison, and all except one could not vote because you have to wait for 5 years if you've been in prison here before you could apply for voting privileges. And they were all pro-Trump. And so I asked them why, and they were sort of vague about it, but it was the same thing that my husband had heard from these other guys, that nothing has happened for us. We've been in prison and we've served time. But here's something else that was interesting, and I think it's important for people who are going to work this time around to ensure that we keep our country on a forward path. The one brother who had been able to vote because he'd been out 5 years and he had applied and he got the papers and everything. So I said, so who did you vote for? This is interesting. He didn't say, I voted for Biden Harris. He said, I didn't vote for Trump, which said to me that there was not a lot of enthusiasm. And then I found another brother a few blocks down the street who was doing some electrical work. And I said, oh, got a minute, can I ask you a question? No, I'm busy. I said, just one quick question. I said, are you able to vote? He said, well, I've been in prison, but I think I can, if I get my papers done. He said, but I got a problem with the ticket. And I said, what's wrong with the ticket? He said, well, I think the woman should be on top. So, there he was. But then this other brother who runs a sort of a sidewalk cafe kind of thing, delicious shrimp and stuff like that. He pointed to the way he thought Trump handled the economy. And when I got him to explain that, he said, look, you've got somebody he named, I can't remember now, but somebody who hadn't paid a lot of taxes and wasn't having to pay. Yeah. He said, so, I don't get it. And so I just think it's important for us to go and find people and hear about what they're thinking and what's moving them, but not wait until the next campaign.
Exactly, which is a mistake. Both sides make that mistake all the time, and we see why. They miss what's really the pulse of what's happening in the community. And even though it was Black voters who saved Joe Biden's candidacy in South Carolina, and it was George W. Bush who said that to Congressman Clyburn yesterday during the inaugural. He said, you are responsible for this today. Joe Biden would not be here if you had not gotten those voters out there and endorsed Joe Biden in South Carolina and rehabilitated his campaign. But there is a undercurrent of Black male voters who are fresh for the taking here for Republicans if Democrats don't get their acts together. And as a lifelong Republican until this election, I often would point out why Democratic Party was failing people of color, and here we had better ideas. But those ideas are non-existent right now. Because of Donald Trump, it became a party of demagoguery and authoritarianism. But I still think that that is an ongoing political discussion that the Democrats should not take for granted.
But I think that was so wonderful about the poet laureate, young woman yesterday, who
she was
talked
phenomenal.
about. She was amazing, and she said, you know, what was it she said? We'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. And she said, Scripture tells us to envision that everyone should sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own, and she goes on about how we've got to work together. And
that's right.
I thought it was really inspiring. And I'm just hoping that the younger generation will have some communication with us oldies so that we can have a coalition of the generations to figure out how to go forward.
Yes.
Again, this is one of the reasons that I put the Giving Voice to the Voiceless. I want to encourage these young people to get out there and talk to people and find out what's on their minds, and, you know, help them to focus on what's important in creating a more perfect union.
I think that's phenomenal. And Amanda Gorman was the MVP of the inauguration. And it's brilliance like hers that gives me hope. So
great.
On that note, thank you so much, Charlayne, for joining us tonight. It was a pleasure. And I hope more people follow your work and your writings and learn more about your life story, because you inspire many of us, me included. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed being here with you, and I won't forget that you promised to get me a top like that.
I sure will. Next time I go to Jerusalem, I will add you to the list because they have beautiful things there.
All the best to you.
Thank you. You too. Oh man, that was an unbelievable conversation, and I'm glad that we were able to have it together. All right, before I bring in Douglad Brinkley to talk a little presidential history and Biden, I want to show you guys what Lincoln Project did yesterday, what we released in anticipation of the 12 p.m. oath of office for President Biden. Take a look.
It's morning in America. Today, Joe Biden will be sworn in as the 46th President of the United States. President Biden and Vice President Harris will step into a White House still recovering from the mistakes of the past. The economy is still suffering, and many Americans remain unemployed. But we are at the dawn of a new decade. And this afternoon, millions of Americans will be able to have pride in our president again. Today, there is reason for hope. Hope that America's strength will overcome the obstacles that almost brought us to our knees. It's morning in America, and under the leadership of Joe Biden, the American people will be stronger, work to be healthier, and make our nation prosperous again. And as we overcome these last 4 years of chaos, one thing is clear: America will be great again.
It's all the feels. It's all the feels. Hope is in the air. Let the sun shine. We're very happy around here. Doug Brinkley, welcome to The Breakdown. I appreciate you joining me tonight so we can talk about this a little bit. It's not going to be all rainbows and sunshine. I mean, we have a honeymoon period right now, but there are challenges ahead, big ones for the Biden administration. And for those who don't know you, I know you from CNN because you're one of the presidential historians over there, but you're also a professor of history at Rice University down there in the great state of Texas. And you are the author of many books. And I hope that some folks have read them, checked them out. There's Doug Brinkley's books. We have the graphic of them. Yes. Well, we will at some point. There we go. So Doug, is there a precedent for moving so quickly? I mean, Joe Biden jumped right into work. He took his pen and his phone and he was signing executive orders before the ink was dry on his oath. Is there precedent for this? To so quickly jump in and decisively undo their predecessor's legacy?
Well, it tends to happen in a time of emergency. If you have when John F. Kennedy was shot, immediately Lyndon Johnson wanted to be seen taking the oath of office, and then immediately at work to let people know the government is still functioning. But usually it's not quite this dramatic and this rushed. But we had a trauma like the Kennedy assassination. We had the siege of the U.S. Capitol, the Trump insurrection. And people around the world were wondering, is the U.S. government going to be able to function? Remember, some of us know the U.S. or D.C., and so we could kind of, in our own minds, realize the severity or non-severity of the situation in the long term. But around the world, people are wondering what in the world is happening to the United States. So Joe Biden wanted to make it really clear there was new management in town, that federal employees will be wearing masks, that we're moving forward on COVID, that some of Trump's more idiotic ideas like drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, that's our country's largest wildlife refuge, established by Dwight D. Eisenhower, Republican president. And here Trump was trying to drill in it, the Keystone Pipeline nixed. He did some smart executive orders very quickly, and I think nobody's doubting that Joe Biden is on the job right now and trying to undo or at least a large hunk of Trumpism.
I don't think that the American people have ever been so excited, like checking their watches, counting down to when the president can get to work. I mean, they were like, to hell with all that inaugural stuff. That's great. Take the oath and get to work and save us, please. Save us from this nightmare. I think that's unusual.
If I could say, I'm good friends with Paul Chavez, Cesar Chavez's son, very close friends with him. And Barack Obama once went out to Cesar Chavez's home when he was running for president. Barack Obama, remember, Obama got Yes We Can coming out of the Chavez United Farm Workers movement.
That's right.
And he actually met Obama there, the widow of Cesar Chavez, who's since passed. But Joe Biden, on the first 24 hours before he was in, they were shipping Cesar Chavez's bust from the Chavez Foundation in California to the White House to put it behind him, because he wanted to do something representative for Latino Americans. There's a Cesar Chavez Day in California, but Chavez was loved by the Vatican. He never broke from the Catholic Church, and so it's also a kind of strong Catholic figure. He also, so I just think Biden was doing a lot of the right optics on his first day to meet constituent needs and to give the world a sense of relief.
Other than maybe Abraham Lincoln presiding over a civil war, where does it rank? Where does Biden's administration rank as far as coming into a situation of just utter shambles, the country just being in shambles? Have we seen this before?
Well, you stated it right. Abraham Lincoln came into Washington. Lincoln in 1860 wasn't on the ballot in 7 southern states. And he came in, they had to have a body double form. The District of Columbia, that was called the Executive Mansion. It wasn't named the White House till Theodore Roosevelt named it that. But the Executive Mansion, it just had like cattle and goats on it. People could go right in to it. And Virginia was secessionist hotbed, and so was Maryland. So nobody had it worse than Lincoln on day one.
I don't know. Trump would argue with you. He used to say, right? He was right there with Lincoln. Maybe he had it worse than I did. He used to be like, "Oh, shut
That's
up with
it.
that."
Lincoln was always the top-ranked president because no matter how bad you think it is, Lincoln had it worse in presidential history. I would put FDR with the Great Depression, because people don't remember when FDR was in Miami in January before his inaugural in March. There was an assassin who started shooting at FDR, and he killed the mayor of Chicago, who was at FDR's side. Franklin Roosevelt was in a wheelchair, went in the back of a limo, taking the bleeding head of the mayor of Chicago with him to a hospital. So there was a lot of anger across the land. And then FDR gave that dramatic inauguration of the New Deal. those two, and I would then say Trump, Biden in the top three of this. The fact that Donald Trump was creating an insurgent neo-civil war in our country. It's going to be remembered in history for hate speech. It's going to be ranked as the worst president ever. I don't even think he belongs in the president's club. He's kind of a weird outlier, like Jefferson Davis or Benedict Arnold, a figure who damaged our country tremendously. There's nothing to recommend his presidential leadership style. So, Biden had a lot to do and has a lot to do. And he showed a lot of nice grace notes along with Kamala Harris on the inaugural. And it was a COVID inaugural, so a lot of things had to be virtual, but they pulled it off very well. And I happened to watch it on CNN, all of the programming after, and the music was great. The fireworks were great. And it was kind of a uplift, and the veil of darkness seemed to kind of dissipate, at least for the time being.
Indeed, it did, and I thought they did a tremendous job. I mean, that Celebrate America was fantastic. I was sold very early during the programming when they showed my home state musical icon, Bon Jovi, not Bruce Springsteen. I get into these fights all the time with Jersey folks, Springsteen or Jovi. I'm Bon Jovi, but anyway, where they had them singing, "Here Comes the Sun" with the actual sunrise in the background. I was like, oh man, if this is how it's starting off, how's it going to end? And that fireworks display was breathtaking.
The fireworks were unbelievable. You just applauded.
I've never seen anything like it here.
No, and I love the visual camera work of showing Biden with his family watching it on television. It had a really nice, it was choreographed and produced and directed exceedingly well.
Impeccably. I cried tears. I've been a mess. I've been an emotional mess throughout this whole thing. And that was, I was crying when Trump left because I was so thrilled he was gone. I cried when the oaths were taken. I cried when Amanda Gorman gave her recitation of her beautiful poem. And I cried with the with the fireworks when I saw that image of Joe Biden with his family and, with Jill standing there watching this spectacular display, and Kamala Harris and her husband at the Lincoln Memorial watching this. And it was just overwhelming, different emotions. And it was unbelievable. So it's going to be tough to go back to normal inaugurals and balls and the normal pageantry of it all when we had that. It was great. But on a more serious note, Biden, one of the big tasks when we've been talking about this is the pandemic and the COVID response. And that press conference today where we just saw how they were left with nothing, and they're really starting from scratch with the COVID response. He said history is going to measure whether we are up to the task. What are the chances that the enormity of what Biden is facing and has to take on, what are the chances that it actually resonates with the public?
Great question. We just have to preface it by saying 2020, the lack of leadership of Donald Trump through the COVID crisis, it was staggering. That there were reports at first that our storehouses and warehouses of pharmaceutical gear and medicines had been depleted some. And I thought maybe after a slow start, Trump would catch on to this, but you can't even make up what a bad leader he was in dealing with the pandemic. This leaves a lot on Joe Biden's plate. There is no federal policy, and there never was one. It was just Trump winging it with a lot of BS and mask on, mask off, and all of his antics. But I think we all have to get behind the Biden administration and say, let's prioritize the money we need to get shots in arms, as many as we can, as quickly as we can. This is a public health care emergency. We need it to treat it in a wartime-like atmosphere, and let's get behind Biden and Harris in that effort. Hopefully it'll resonate. Hopefully we'll be able to get out of the hole we're in by the summer. But it is it's so damaged the economy and workers' lives and people that are still economically crippled by this terrible pandemic that we have to both pray and start trying to help by getting the Biden administration off and running on its first months in office.
Yeah, and in the Trump era, expertise and experience were frowned upon. You were vilified if you actually were an expert in your respective field of study here. And Joe Biden is the polar opposite in a number of ways, but one of the ways is that he actually has significant federal experience. 40 years as a senator, then vice president, and now president. Um, I think he has the most experience prior to his presidency, except for maybe George H.W. Bush, as far as federal experience. But what does it say to you? Do you think that the American people will be able to embrace expertise again in this post-Trump era, that won't be vilified anymore? Or are we just stuck with millions of Americans who continue to brush that off as elitism?
Well, I think Joe Biden was right when he got into the White House and said, "It feels like I'm coming home." He had been in and out of there his whole career, and then 8 years as vice president for Barack Obama. So the good news is Biden didn't have a learning curve in the regard where he knows where things are situated. He knows how a White House should function. The Obama years was almost a scandal-free 8 years, and government, the wheels of our federal government churn well during those 8 years. And incidentally, Bill Clinton's 8 years, the Lewinsky situation aside, Bill Clinton eventually learned how to get things done with Congress, a very hostile Congress, and when Newt Gingrich came in and all that. So I'll be curious to see if Biden and Mitch McConnell can at least do business together for, let's call it 200 days. While we're dealing with the COVID crisis, can we do big economic stimulus package? Can we do some things together? I don't know. The Senate impeachment trial, if it occurs, might interfere with that. But I have some hope in that regard, because I know how Ronald Reagan was able to get along with Tip O'Neill and Ted Kennedy and get some things done. And hopefully Mitch McConnell, who's gotten bit by the monster that was Trump quite badly, might decide that his reputation in history is going to be to start helping the U.S. get back on its feet after 4 disastrous years of Trump and nearly a year of COVID ravaging our nation.
Yeah, I think that the relationship between the executive and legislative branch has been damaged in a way that is potentially irreparable if the leaders don't make a decision that they want to work together. It's clear you have people who are institutionalists like Chuck Schumer and Nancy and Pelosi and even Mitch McConnell. He's a Senate institutionalist, but you have the younger guys coming up, the Josh Hawleys and the Ted Cruzes of the world, that are willing to just burn it all down and stray from normal governing. It hasn't even been about accomplishing anything. It's about negative partisanship for them. And I think that does damage to the upper chamber. But with Biden coming in and using executive power, I mean, as a conservative, I've been very worried about a growing executive branch and ruling by pen and the phone, as Obama said. I've got a pen and a phone and all these executive orders, the extension of presidential power. But yet here we're applauding Biden for coming in and signing all of these executive orders. He hasn't done anything with Congress yet. Do you think that this is going to change the definition of presidential power for the good, or are we going to go down a path of a more imperialistic presidency?
That's another wonderful question. The truth of the matter is, executive power with presidents, it depends if you like the president. For example, Abraham Lincoln used executive power to free the slaves, or Theodore Roosevelt used it to save the Grand Canyon from being mined for zinc, asbestos, and copper. And so we can go through history and say, oh, thank God for that lot of executive power because it did a good thing. But we just saw what Donald Trump did, abusing executive power, trying to take money out of our Defense Department and put it to the wall with Mexico. Trying to do a Muslim ban. Luckily, our judicial system held up, and they curtailed some of Trump's attempts. So I think what Biden's doing is trying to undo some of the most egregious bits of Trumpism, at the same time trying to develop some kind of relationship with the U.S. Senate That Georgia election really mattered. Getting 2 Democrats in on that fact that the Democrats have Congress and the Senate. And Mitch McConnell is going to go down in history as a major figure in the Senate. I mean, the conservatives got 3 Supreme Court justices in during Donald Trump, and Mitch McConnell was a puppeteer for a lot of that. So if he could pivot and just partner with Biden for what I'm saying, first 100 days, a little bit of a honeymoon and try to find common ground, it would be really great for the nation. I suppose a year later, Mitch McConnell will be at Biden's throats, but at least if they can get our country up and running again, restore national confidence. And we all know that we've got to do a massive COVID stimulus initiative. We've got to put money in people's pockets right now. George W. Bush, when the Great Recession hit, was forced to spend money, even though he was a conservative. And this is the moment that we've got to get the money to the people.
Let's hope. Let's hope that Mitch McConnell and, the adults in the room actually start adulting and stop with this nonsense that they have been engaged in. I mean, I'm not holding my breath. We'll see what happens during impeachment and how easy it is for Biden to get his nominees confirmed through the Senate so that they can start actually putting the pieces back together with this government. So we'll see.
Yeah, we got to move on those. We need confirmations to move quickly. We've got to be in high gear right now.
Just to put it in context, George W. Bush had a lot of vacancies still in the government in the lead up to 9/11, which some pondered that it contributed to the missing the signs and missing some of the warning signs leading up to 9/11. George W. Bush was still putting his government together. We can't have that. It just weakens us as a nation, and we were weakened as it was coming into this with Donald Trump. So Mitch McConnell and Republican senators, don't be jerks. Confirm Biden's cabinet secretaries and his appointees so we can get to work to fix it. We can argue policy later. Professor Brinkley, thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. So we got a little history lesson there. And I think Doug Brinkley would say that Donald Trump is the worst president in history. Kevin Cruz, who we had on last night, actually said Andrew Johnson, but that Trump might have slightly eked out the worst because of the insurrection. So I think it's unanimous amongst the historians who are friends of the show. All right. Before we end the show, I think we have a couple live callers. Let's take them. Our first caller, Daniel from Denver. Oh, we got Jersey first. I like that. Lisa from Jersey. There we go. You're unmuted now.
Hi. Yes, I'm. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Welcome.
Can you guys hear me?
I hear you loud and
great.
clear.
How are you? I'm from Jersey too, Italian. So you'll get the hand motions and the animation.
Absolutely.
But, first of all, I'm very happy to be on with you. I'm like humbled to be on with you guys. So I want to say like one statement and then I'll get into my question. I just want you guys to know, like people like me, I'm an independent. I vote on person. Some people think this is stupid, but I vote on character first, policy second. So I voted both parties. When this all started happening, I was like searching for the normal Republicans. Like, where are the normal Republicans? So you guys like saved my sanity, number one. Number two, I want to be happy today, right? Like I'm also a nurse. So I'm a nurse. I was a psych detox nurse for 16 years, health insurance, case management. And then I became an entrepreneur. But in my nursing career, I'm very worried about something because I was a psych nurse. I'm worried about this QAnon phenomena. And I think we talk about it, we joke about it. I call them like Q quacks, Kata and stuff, right? Like it's all like, who are these Q quacks? They're getting into our government. They're in Congress. This Lauren Boebert, she literally tweeted the morning of the insurrection. Today is 1776. While they're being attacked.
Yep.
Just
and
think
Nancy
while the attack is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but like we got to get into the psychology of that. what normal person would tweet about Pelosi's movements? She's in on it. This Marjorie Taylor Greene just put articles of impeachment for Biden. I know it's not going anywhere, but the point is, these people are going to be introducing legislation, voting on legislation that affects my kids' futures. I get really deep into this QAnon stuff because I'm a psych nurse. I want to understand, what are they seeing? What are they watching? So I watch some of these videos. High production, whoever's behind it, and I don't want to sound like them, but it's like high production value. So propaganda wouldn't be effective, right, if it wasn't somewhat believable. So they make this propaganda somewhat believable, unless you have a really critically thinking brain. Oh God, I sound like Trump. I got a big brain, but you know what I mean? It's like, this is getting dangerous. Now, just one other thing. About 5 years ago, I really got into studying World War II, the European theater, Nazism, the rise of Nazism. I mean, I've studied it like every day, 7 days a week, while I'm cleaning, while I'm working, I listen to testimonies and documentaries all day. A lot of people say today,
you're horrified.
Oh, yes, I'm horrified because today, people, when I make correlations between Goebbels and powerful propaganda, and people say to me, oh my God, you're calling Trump Hitler again. It's like, if you don't see the correlations, you're the one that needs to get educated, because this can happen. It can happen again. And I never thought in my life I'd say this. It could happen again. And next time it could be more successful, because Trump's an idiot, but it could be more 100%. Successful. If he only knew the power this man has.
I know. Lisa, let me tell you something. Oh, we lost her. Okay, well, I first of all, I was going to ask her if she was Team Springsteen or Bon Jovi, but I think that she's a Bon Jovi, Team Bon Jovi. But she sounds just like the conversations that my mom and I have with each other. First of all, I love hearing the Jersey accent. It's one of the things I miss about Jersey: pizza, bagels, and Jersey accents. So. But my mom and I talk about this all the time. If people only knew, we started making those correlations between the rise of Nazism and the power of propaganda very early on. That's why I started calling it a cult. In 2018, I was like, this is a freaking cult. And if you missed our episode with Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat, she is an expert on authoritarianism. She wrote an amazing book. I suggest everyone read it. It's very, very it's an easy read. It's called Strongmen, and the parallels between Trump and Trumpism and how he does what he does. It's terrifying. And Lisa was exactly right. Our democracy is fragile. Biden admitted that during his inauguration speech and said democracy triumphed. But if we don't do something about the path we're on now, it may not triumph next time. So it's up to us, which is what I wrote at CNN.com yesterday about the importance of Biden's speech. It's on us to make sure that democracy continues to triumph. All right, I think we have one last caller for the night. I love Jersey, folks. All right. Hi, sir.
Hi, Tara. You got
Where
me?
are you from? Are you Daniel from Denver?
Yeah. It's an honor to talk to you. It's an honor to talk to you, Tara, and thank God for the Lincoln Project. My question is going to be basically how do the Democrats win back Florida especially Miami-Dade County? Before it was a solid blue county, now it's borderline purple. I understand, I guess, in this election, Biden won by 7%, where normally the margin is 29%. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the easy answer for this going forward would be that, if Biden's a good president, then he should win Florida. He should, do well there. I guess I normally wouldn't care if it was like a Mitt Romney running or a normal Republican classic, as Bill Maher would like to say, running. Yeah. But assuming a Trumpian figure wins the nomination, Josh Hawley, Don Jr.,
God help us.
Or Nikki Haley. I'm not sure where she is on the scale of Trumpy. But I guess that's my question, basically. How do you win back Monday? And
how do you win back Florida?
I will say, it's a side note. I grew up about 20 miles south of San Francisco, and after experiencing Trump for 4 years, I regret ever thinking bad or saying anything bad about George W. Bush. I just have to say that.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of, let me tell you what, after 4 years of Trump, I feel awful saying anything ever bad about Barack Obama. We're all, like I said, we have political PTSD from the 4 years of Trump. And I feel like we're going through group therapy with Biden's inauguration. So to answer your question, to answer Daniel's questions about Florida, I lived in South Florida for a couple of years. My family had a house in the Florida Keys for 20 years. And I worked on campaigns down there. And South Florida is a unique area. And the reason why the Biden campaign lost Florida so terribly was they made a decision pretty early on that they weren't going to invest too much in Florida. They looked at, there were other pathways because Florida is such a large state. It's expensive to campaign there. And they thought that they had a better chance by putting their resources into the blue wall. South Florida, Miami-Dade, they lost a Latino vote because the Cuban Americans down there are traditionally Republican and they are very influential. And the idea of socialism and, defunding the police and this whole socialism, that messaging resonated with them because of Castro and what happened with Cuba. So, and you had Venezuelans, you had people who came from, in South Florida, it's a transit point for Central and South America. So you have a lot of people that come from those places that say, we're not going back to that. So that messaging of constantly repeating the socialism, that resonated, and the Democrats have a problem. The progressive wing of the Democrats are going to run into a problem in South Florida if they don't change their messaging on things. And Florida really should be a purple state. And with Trump down there now and Ivanka running, it'll be very interesting to see what happens. She hasn't announced, but that's the scuttlebutt. She's going to run against Rubio in 2022. It's going to be a fascinating race to watch. Just don't forget, Andrew Gillum came within, I think, 44,000 votes of beating Ron DeSantis in Florida for governor. So Democrats, get on it. All right. Thank you for those questions tonight. And before we end the show, we were saying before that we're starting something new called Abe is Watching, because you hear Rick and I say that often, how Lincoln Project is involved in things and we see what's going on, and that Abe is watching. Well, Abe is watching some of the, the people who need to be held accountable. But there's also Abe watching those who are doing good. And there's a lot of good happening in this world. And I think that we need to start highlighting that. And, not so much doom and gloom. We need some balance. So tonight, Abe is watching a National Guardsman who was called to duty to protect the Capitol. His name is Jacob Kohut. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He was called to his duty as a National Guardsman to protect the Capitol, but he's also a music teacher in Fairfax County in Northern Virginia. And in between his assignments, he continued to teach his elementary school music class. And that's a picture you're looking at of him right now in the back of his Humvee, zooming into his students and continuing their music education. He's a band teacher in elementary and middle school. And he said that it was too important for him to maintain his relationship with his students. He did not want to disrupt them anymore just because he'd been called into duty. And his principal said, listen, we'll get a substitute. He said, no. I want to make sure that I continue to teach my students. And he said, quote, I'm a soldier for the Guard, but I feel like I'm as much a soldier for music education. And we want to salute you, Sergeant Kohut. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. But thank you for what you do. And I think that's amazing. And for all of you out there, if you have someone who's a teacher, who's a first responder, who's in the military, who's a public servant, thank them. That's our call to action tonight. Thank them for what they do, because that type of servant's heart is what makes our country amazing and great. And we salute you, Sergeant Kohut, for what you've done, and everyone who has served in the military and for your service. Thank you. And Abe thanks you as well. And that's it for us tonight, the end of a glorious week. We will be back next week on Tuesday at our normal time. And don't forget to follow us at the new LPTV Twitter handle at LPTV. And don't forget, if you haven't seen our new show, debuted last night, We're Speaking. You can check out highlights from there in the live stream with our new hosts, Lisa and Maya. Be sure to check out We're Speaking as well. And we'll see you next week. Good night.
We're Speaking is a show that elevates and amplifies the diversity and power of women's voices.
Black women are hugely responsible for getting Donald Trump, an incredibly racist president, out of the White House. We can't have real progress without real people.
So we want to hear from all of you. Text us, tweet us, come hang out in our Zoom room.
Welcome to We're Speaking on LPTV.
So I'm going to send you some ideas of COVID, public health experts, doctors, and things, because it's getting bad, and I think
It is the dawn of a new day in America. It is a day where the transfer of power from one presidency to the next means the republic is strong and democracy is alive and well. The eyes of the country and the world are focused on this moment, our moment, America's moment. This ceremony stretches back into our past, an honored tradition, a sign of our strength, a signal across the world that this land of the free endures, that our republic still stands, having weathered rough seas and survived the toughest of tests. We always do. Generations of patriots, men and women of every race and belief, have sacrificed to bring us here. It wasn't easy. There has been a terrible cost in lives, blood, and painful division. But today, we've moved past the darkness and up into the light. We turn our attention today to the Constitution of the United States, because the Constitution isn't only our founding document, it is also a word that means vitality, health, and strength. And the Constitution of our country remains strong. Today, a new president and vice president will stand before all of us, calling on America once again to heed the better angels of our nature, asking us to put country over party, to stand together against the challenges before us, not as partisans, but as patriots. We will not always agree. We will not always live up to our lofty goals, but we will move forward together, because it is the dawn of a new day in America.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Just watching my algorithms get crushed. I guess I did something to piss off the Instagram gods, so hopefully you're seeing this stuff anyway. We'll do what we can. Talk to you soon.